There was utter silence in the courtroom. As Gene Deal, who had served as duty security chief for more than 15 years, looked squarely at his former boss and whispered the words that would alter everything. "I saw him, do it all, and I have proof." Everyone watched. In a matter of seconds, Diddy's expression changed from one of confidence to fear. His lawyers were speaking to one another in a panic. The members of the prosecution team couldn't help but smile. They had been waiting for this time. For more breaking coverage of high-profile cases like this one, please like and subscribe if you're new to our channel. We give you the true story behind the headlines. No one anticipated that Diddy's most dependable defender would turn into his most destructive accuser. When John D., a massive guy who had once threatened anyone who approached his well-known employer too closely, mounted the stand, the room was tense. This security expert attracted attention until he began disclosing information he had held for almost 20 years. The courtroom was filled with gasps. The judge froze too. Not a word. Not a warning. Only Gene Deal, calmly recounting the atrocities he has seen while working for duty. Diddy had been at ease throughout the trial up until that point, frequently grinning and chatting in low tones with his lawyers. But something had changed. Perhaps it was witnessing the man who knew all of his secrets willing to talk openly. Perhaps it was the awareness that he was sitting across from someone who had been present in the room during his most intimate moments. Perhaps it was the knowledge that the one person he believed would never turn on him was going to do just that. It did whatever it was. He had finished acting as though he was no longer seated there as a famous person. He was there as an employer who had given too many secrets to the wrong person. A man who abruptly became aware that the walls were closing in and the courtroom was unprepared for what Gene Deal would say. Because the information disclosed by Diddy's ex-bodyguard on the alleged illegal activity and systematic abuse of private parties wasn't merely shocking. It was a first-hand report from someone who had been compensated to permanently conceal these truths. It began as any other trial day would. The journalists crouched in their assigned rows, lawyers muttered plans, and the room was alive with low-volume chatter as they awaited the next witness to be called. The room, however, transformed when Jean Deal's name was called as the following witness. A pin could be heard dropping. Some believed it to be a PR gimmick, while others believed it to be an error. However, everyone could tell this was genuine by the way Tenure Deal approached the stand with a purposeful gait and a determined expression. The judge did, raising an eyebrow. The man who had been idly reclined on his chair appeared to have been hit by lightning. He lost the color in his face. Mid-sentence, his hands, which had been taking notes with assurance during the trial, froze. John D. sat down at the witness stand and looked no one in the eye. Diddy was sitting up straight now, his eyes wide with what appeared to be panic, but he didn't even look at him. "I'm here to speak honestly about what I saw." Gene Deal started. "These secrets have been with me for far too long." Because what John D. was going to say wasn't included in any media narrative, the court permitted it, and the trial changed course immediately. It wasn't a leak on social media. It was something that had been carefully protected by a select group of workers who had received high compensation for their silence. Diddy's lawyer protested right away, claiming Gene Deal had signed several non-disclosure agreements and casting doubt on his reliability as a witness. The prosecution gently clarified that Deal had undergone extensive screening as a witness and that NAS does not include criminal activity. The court dismissed the objection and told Deal to proceed after a brief sidebar. Reporters quickly typed every word as the courtroom fell silent. To listen, even the court artist had paused his drawing. As the prosecution team went over their notes with increased assurance, Diddy's relatives in the gallery exchanged anxious looks. John D. straightened his necktie and turned to face the jury. "E isn't the basis for what I'm going to tell you. On hearsay or unreliable sources, I was present. I seen it firsthand. I was compensated to prevent others from doing so." The courtroom was filled with a murmur. The main lawyer for Diddy got up to protest once more, but Diddy stopped him by grabbing his arm. He seemed to be anticipating what was going to happen and eager to find out how much his erstwhile confidant would divulge. The prosecutor came forward holding multiple folders of evidence, which were displayed as exhibits. Your Honor, employment records, security logs, and photos that show Mr. Deal in the locations in question are among the documents he has produced to support his statement. The judge nodded after reviewing the evidence logs. You can continue. John Deal inhaled deeply before starting to talk. Everything would alter with the next sentence. 1.0s. I've long kept a lot of things to myself. According to John D., I have over 25 years of experience protecting celebrities in the industry. Nothing comes close to what I saw, even though I've worked with the biggest stars in Hollywood. He faced Diddy head-on while working for Sean Combs. I became complicit because of you. It began with a simple job offer, as many work partnerships do, Gene Deal told the court. The way they presented it, it came from a security firm that specialized in protecting celebrities. It was meant to be a high-profile job with great compensation. They claimed that I would be in charge of protection for one of the most well-known musicians. My previous pay was double that of the Riumum. I believed I knew what I was going into because I had spent years in the military and then private security. However, John D. realized something was off the first day he arrived to Doty's mansion. The home had secret rooms and distinct wings, and it was enormous. Employees shifted uneasily, avoiding eye contact. The other guards were whispering to each other. On the second, he inquired about common security procedures. That should have been the first warning sign, but the leaving head of security pulled him aside. It felt like they didn't want standard security measures that could produce records, even though they said it was for confidentiality and to preserve Mr. Combs's private. He was progressively exposed to other facets of the work. The standards were out of the ordinary for protecting celebrities. There were stringent guidelines on who may leave events, and it seemed like someone was constantly being watched, not just for control but also for their own safety. After 2 weeks on the job and a number of private occasions, John D. made that statement. Diddy came right up to him. You don't just work for me, you work for the brand, he continued, grinning. Nothing you see leaves these walls. That grin, it was ownership, not warmth. Back then, I had recently bought a new house and was providing for my family. John D. went on. Although the money was too tempting to pass up, I also didn't feel comfortable with what I was seeing, so I started maintaining my own insurance policy and records. He described how he started recording conversations, events, and situations in a private journal before using covertly captured photos and videos on his phone to support his findings. I had no clear purpose in mind for this information. It was self-defense. If someone was harmed or something occurred, I did not wish to be the sole person held accountable. Deal had been requested to sign non-disclosure agreements, the court inquired. Indeed. Your Honor, there are several NAS that are modified nearly every year, each one much more expansive and stringent than the last. By 2015, in effect, I was giving up the right to talk about anything I saw, even if it involved illegal activity. The prosecution responded that NAS cannot constitutionally bar someone from reporting crimes or testifying in criminal proceedings, notwithstanding Diddy's lawyer's claim that the evidence was inadmissible because of these NAS. The judge took into account both points and decided that Deal's evidence and testimony would only be admitted if they were directly relevant to the criminal accusations. Deal clarified that 3 months prior, after witnessing the surveillance footage of Diddy abusing Cassie in the hotel hallway, he had given his paperwork to federal agents. That video was exactly the same as what I had seen numerous times. The situation wasn't unique. Everything went according to plan. The prosecutor moved uneasily in his chair as he got ready to present the first piece of evidence, a security log from 2:08 p.m. He grimaced as he read the memo that his lawyer had handed him. Nobody was ready for what they were going to hear in the courtroom. The first exhibit was shown on the courtroom screens by the prosecutor. On March 15, 2:08, Gene Deal's name and signature appeared on a security log. The record included items such as the female guest trying to leave at 15:03 a.m., being detained in the East Wing per the boss's orders, and the subject being soothed and brought back to the main area when the boss intervened. According to John D., The security team's documentation utilized the euphemisms detained and boss intervention. Although we were told not to write down specific incidents, being held meant that someone could not leave, and when the boss intervened, Mr. Combs would usually threaten, intimidate, or even physically attack the person until they did as he asked. Another log, this one from 2010, was displayed by the prosecutor. For the third time this month, Deal recognized his handwriting in the margins where he had written personal remarks. Protocol needs to be discussed with the team in the same manner. Deal clarified, following the first year. I understood that we weren't offering conventional security. We enforced the law. It was not our responsibility to keep Mr. Combs safe from harm. It was to shield him from the repercussions. Deal was asked to clarify what he meant by enforcer by the prosecutor. At every private gathering, we were told to seize phones at the door. It was common for guests who were personally invited by Mr. Combs to have their food or beverages spiked with drugs without their awareness. We were instructed to use physical force if necessary to stop them from leaving early. We were sent to deal with anyone who threatened to report what had happened. Deal explained how Diddy would have what were known as special events within his Miami houses, New York and Los Angeles. These weren't merely parties, these were planned events in which specific attendees, typically young women attempting to enter the field, were segregated, given alcohol, and then placed in circumstances they hadn't agreed to. The prosecutor displayed a number of Deal's own photos of different members of the security team obstructing exits, seizing phones, and in one unsettling picture, dragging what looked to be an unconscious woman down a hallway. This was from a 2012 Miami party. After realizing the nature of the event, Deal recognized that the woman had attempted to flee. One of Mr. Combs's helpers gave her a drink, and after half an hour, she was hardly able to stand. I told her to go to a private room so she could speak with Mr. Combs later. As Deal explained the methodical nature of these incidents, his testimony became increasingly unsettling. He explained how each step of the process was planned out, including how to find possible targets, how to keep them apart from their friends, which team members would serve them, which rooms to use, the doctored drinks, and which activities were handled by a well-oiled machine. According to him, some employees had specialized responsibilities. For example, procurers would find and invite young women, handlers would remain near them during events, cleaners would come in later to clear away any evidence, and fixers would follow up with anyone who might cause issues later. Deal stated in his testimony that he was a member of the security framework that made this possible. Who could enter, who could leave, and who could use their phones or other recording devices were all under the authority of my crew. We established a closed space where Mr. Combs could act as he pleased without worrying about being discovered. The most incriminating proof was a video that Deal had surreptitiously taken on his phone in 2015. In the footage, Diddy was seen arguing angrily with a woman who was attempting to leave a party. Was he able to be heard saying, "You stay until I tell you to go. What happens to those who cross me, do you know? They vanish." She was crying and stating that all she wanted was to return home when her face was blurred during the court presentation. In response, Diddy firmly grasped her arm and instructed an off-camera person to confiscate her phone and ensure she understood the circumstances. Deal clarified, "I knew that someone would eventually need to know the truth, so I decided to capture it. This was not a singular occurrence. During the 15 years I worked with him, this occurred nearly every month. As more proof was provided, a pattern of abuse, compulsion, and intimidation that lasted for almost 10 years became apparent. Many of the claims made by earlier witnesses were supported by the security logs, photos, and videos, which documented actions that had previously been testified to, but had not been confirmed by an insider. Midway through the evidence presentation, Diddy was clearly upset. His lawyers, who appeared more and more worried, had been receiving angry letters from him. He shook his head or said, "That's a lie," multiple times, just loud enough to be heard in the first row. Deal was questioned by the prosecutor about his choice to come forward at this time. After 15 years of silence, what changed? When I watched the hotel footage of Diddy attacking Cassie, Deal stared straight at him, and I instantly recognized that behavior. Even though I had seen it hundreds of times, knowing that it was captured on camera allowed the public to finally see what I had been seeing for years. I was unable to remain silent any longer. I had been convincing myself that I was merely carrying out my duties, but I came to the realization that I had been condoning abuse, and I could no longer stand it. Deal's calmness started to waver as he went on to list certain instances, times, and places that linked them to other witness accounts. He whispered frantically to his legal team as his face reddened and he undid his tie. The courtroom watched as the man who had spent the trial portraying himself as the victim of unfounded accusations was presented with evidence by the one who had previously been compensated to keep his darkest secrets safe, to Syed, John. Over the years, he believed they were going to talk about security issues, so he followed Diddy into numerous private rooms. Rather, he was deeply shaken by what he witnessed. Some of the young ladies I recognized from modeling ads or music videos appeared bewildered and lost. Some others sought to look at me for assistance because they were afraid. Did he do it while others watched and occasionally recorded? Everything was being directed by him as if it were the most commonplace thing in the world. He stopped and swallowed hard. The point was that I had no idea how to quit the job. A few days after seeing a particularly upsetting occurrence in 2011, he said in a calm but hollow voice, "Once you're in deal." I received a blocked number. "The boss is aware that you have been asking questions." That was all the voice said. "Keep your family and your NDA in mind." They hung up after that. Until a package showed up at his house, he believed it to be a meaningless threat. It had no markings. There was a USB drive inside. I looked even though I nearly didn't. The video showed me assisting in the arrest of a woman who was attempting to exit a party. I was standing at the door preventing her from leaving, but I don't recall actively taking part. Did he say, "Now we both have something to lose?" in the voice behind the camera? According to Deal's testimony, the fear he felt at that precise moment was unheard of. I understood that I was more than just a worker. I was compromised. At this point, he explained, he started to record everything he saw in a methodical manner. It was no longer solely for my safety. I was aware that some victims lacked a voice, strength, or means of retaliation. I reasoned that there would be responsibility if I ever gathered enough proof. In order to demonstrate how he allegedly kept control over not just the victims, but also his own employees, the prosecutor presented further security records and private notes from 2012 to 2020. Diddy's text messages giving Deal instructions on how to handle issues, emails talking about cleanup at different properties, and pictures of what Deal characterized as the morning after, scenes of ruined rooms and women's clothes that had been thrown away, were all included. A 2016 text message from Diddy to Deal read, "Requires a thorough search of the Miami house, including all rooms and devices. If anything is recorded, it must be located and destroyed. There are no exceptions." Deal described how the business grew over time. Parties at his properties were the beginning, but as time went on, he was able to rent homes, stay in hotel suites, and even have a yacht wherever he traveled. The same ETO system would be used, with phones being gathered, exits being watched, drugs being accessible, and a staff on standby to deal with any issues. The prosecutor inquired about particular instances in which other celebrities or business leaders were said to have taken part in or observed these activities. Deal mentioned a number of well-known people who had attended, some as participants and others as witnesses who appeared uneasy. Not everybody took part. Deal stated that while some people would quit right away after learning what was going on, the majority remained silent out of fear of being blacklisted or worse. People were frequently reminded by Mr. Combs, "I both create and destroy careers." He explained how Diddy would use a mix of career opportunities, lavish gifts, and subliminal threats to keep people loyal. He would invite you on his yacht, pay bonuses for especially challenging circumstances, and make you feel like a member of his inner circle before casually bringing up someone who had been fired and was now unemployed in the industry. It was always the same: remain faithful or suffer. Conversations on certain instances that matched the accusations in the criminal case were also disclosed by the recordings and paperwork. To preserve Diddy's reputation, there were talks about bribing possible witnesses, erasing evidence, and fabricating stories. Several jurors were clearly agitated as this portion of the hearing went on. While taking copious notes, Diddy's VE irritation had turned into a hard, icy gaze at his former chief of security. Deal explained his own position inside the system as he wrapped up this section of his testimony. Every day I was complicit. Every time I kept someone from quitting, I remained in that position. Each time I turned my head away, I contributed to the issue. The personal threat started after Deal stated, "I can't change that, but I can tell the truth now and hope that it helps the victims find some justice." In the middle of the night, I began receiving odd calls. Outside our house, my wife saw cars parked. According to my children's instructors, strange men have inquired about their schedules. I was aware of it. Pressure was the cause. He didn't have to say it out loud. He simply stated that my continuing quiet would be at the expense of my family's safety. Thus, for years, Deal claimed to have carried out his duties while surreptitiously recording everything. He ignored his wife's worries, smiled during staff meetings, and concentrated on keeping his family safe. But each time I read a news report about someone accusing the male producer, Dirty Cassie, I thought of all the others. I asked myself, why am I still silent if they are speaking? He surveyed the courtroom. These women weren't the only ones Diddy harmed. Deal said that the reason I ended up in court was because he corrupted everyone around him and made us all complicit in his acts. Deal leaned closer to the microphone, hesitated, and looked at the jurors. It was more than just a job. The trap was that. He claimed that ever since then, everything he did seemed to have a catch. He clarified that his silence was guaranteed by the settlement plan. Although I had a respectable basic income, the real money came from bonuses related to crisis management and special events. In addition to losing that money, I knew that leaving would result in my being blacklisted throughout the industry, and there was always the implication that if I spoke out, evidence of my personal involvement would come to light. This didn't happen once or twice, he remarked. Diddy didn't need to threaten individuals directly. It became a routine. He had security teams with compromising evidence, attorneys with NAS, accountants with bonus structures, and systems that handled it for him. He was skilled at weaving a web in which everyone was connected. There was something for everyone to lose. Deal was questioned by the prosecutor regarding a particular instance in 2018 that made him think about leaving. What caused you to want to depart? Deal told the story of a young woman who was so high on drugs that she stopped breathing. It was in the middle of the night that we had to phone a private physician. No formal report, no hospitals. After being revived by the doctor, she was returned home the following day with a gift bag containing another NDA and $25,000 in cash. I informed Mr. Combs that I was no longer able to do this. Deal explained how Daisy reacted. After bringing me into his home office, he displayed my mortgage details, my children's college funds, and family photos. You're turning your back on this. This is what you are risking. Are you certain? The prosecutor aired a recording that Deal had made of what Diddy said in a 2019 conversation with Deal. You are too knowledgeable to ever abandon this family. Either you're on my side or you're against me, John. You don't want to oppose me, and there isn't any middle ground. Deal clarified that the operation grew more cautious but continued as reports of inquiries started to circulate. Staff were segregated and we moved to more rural locations with stricter security measures, so fewer individuals saw the entire scene. But the behavior persisted. He said about being inside when the public started to hear accusations about Diddy. Everyone on the inside knew it was true when Cassie filed her complaint. We all witnessed it, but we were told to keep everything to ourselves in order to discredit her and give the impression that she was only want money. Why did you ultimately decide to give your evidence to federal investigators? The prosecutor asked. Deal's tone became deeper and quieter. I was silent for 15 years. I persuaded myself that by speaking up, I was putting my family in danger. However, as the hotel video began to appear, he claimed that he instantly recognized the pattern when he first watched the CCTV film of Diddy abusing Cassie. Then another member of the security team called me, he said. They're attempting to purchase the hotel video, John. They are requesting favors from the cops. I knew I couldn't remain silent any longer because this might vanish. The floor seemed to have fallen out from under him, he said. Prior to realizing that hotel surveillance footage can be withheld, I had no idea it even existed. I was aware that the evidence I had gathered might be the only way to bring about justice. Deal claimed that he spent the entire night going over his records, including the security logs, pictures, recordings, and text messages. I was the only one who had kept it intact, and it was all there, a comprehensive record of years of torture. He claimed that guilt, not fear, was the tipping point. I understood that more people would suffer if I remained silent. I couldn't tolerate the possibility of more abuse if I remained silent. This case will eventually be taught to my kids. That's what I wanted them to know. Ultimately, he told the court that he called the FBI personally, so I made the proper decision. I informed them that I have proof dating back 15 years and that I would be happy to answer any questions they might have. He turned to face the jurors. I was an enabler as well as a witness. I observed, I took notes, and I said nothing. Then, with a sharper tone, he turned back to face Diddy, and you knew I saw it all. Gene Deal was given permission by the judge to address Diddy directly during his closing remarks. He got out of the witness chair, moved a few paces closer, and met his gaze. Out of fear, you created an empire. You called it loyalty, he started. You referred to it as family. The bad boy way, as you put it. However, you only created a criminal operation that took lives. Diddy remained silent. His lawyer whispered in his ear while he sat still. Deal didn't flinch. I witnessed your treatment of those women. I witnessed your treatment of anyone who disobeyed you. When the doors were closed, I heard what you had to say. You harm people to gain power and pleasure. D then took something out of his pocket. His initial job contract from the year 2000 was prepared and yellowed. Just before I saw what you were actually doing, I sold my integrity on this day. I started contributing to the issue on that day. He presented it to the judge. This has served as a reminder to me of the consequences of good people remaining silent. Deal looked to the jury. 1.2s. You're missing the bigger picture if you believe that this is simply about parties, celebrities, or lifestyle. This is about strong guys setting up structures to take advantage of weaker people, and it will continue if we don't hold them responsible. Then he had his final encounter with Diddy. You told me once. The only currency that really counts is loyalty. Since the truth is more important, he returned to the stand, gathered his notes, and bided his time until he was discharged. Did he too? He sat white-faced and stiff, his fingers unblinking, his hands gripping the table's edge. Because he was up against someone who couldn't be bought, bullied, or silenced for the first time throughout his trial. One last question was posed by the prosecutor. Deal, mister. Do you think Sean Combs continues to endanger others in light of everything you've testified to today? As long as he has money and power, Deal didn't think twice. The mechanism he created is still in place, yes. The victims are still terrified and those who aided him are still out there. The proof is the only thing that has changed. Deal was released from his testimony. Diddy abruptly stood up, causing tension in the courtroom. Before anyone could respond, security guards approached. Diddy yelled, "After everything I did for you, you betrayed me. Deal. Stop and turn around, Sean. You compromised yourself by believing that your wealth and notoriety would exempt you from the law." Order was promptly summoned by the judge. Diddy resisted their physical restraints as he continued to yell lies and charges of treachery while being held by his own lawyers and court officials. Everyone in attendance was astounded to see the once-posed music magnate lose control in public. Diddy's legal team led him out of the courtroom when the judge declared a recess. The final picture before the doors closed showed Diddy's face twisted in dread and anger as the guy who had been his most reliable guardian left. At last, a mob had gathered outside the courthouse after hearing about the explosive evidence, and he was free of the secrets he had been carrying for 15 years. After the deal was revealed, there was a brief pause before inquiries erupted from everywhere. He held up his hand for silence. Other than what I testified to today, I have nothing else to say. It's not about me here. Justice and the victims are at stake. He then proceeded to a waiting vehicle, which was guarded by U.S. Marshals. A reporter yelled, "Are you worried about reprisals?" "I've been scared for 15 years, Deal said, pausing just before boarding the vehicle. For the first time, I'm not terrified today." He vanished as the car door closed. John D. did not appear to have won anything when he finally left the witness stand. He appeared as though he had finally freed himself from years of moral stooping. The courtroom was still in shock after Diddy's tantrum, and they were hardly sure how to react to what they had seen. A few jurors were clearly affected, wiping away tears, and Diddy reportedly continued his tirade in a private conference room after being removed from the courtroom before being sedated by a doctor, despite the fact that Judge appeared shaken by the intensity of the confrontation. Deal left without saying anything to the reporters. He didn't posture himself or brag, bearing the burden of 15 years of witnessed suffering on his shoulders as he walked out the front of the courthouse with his head held high. He reportedly said this in response to reporters' later question about if he feared for his safety. "Now, I am protected by the truth. Someone who has nothing left to hide cannot be threatened." However, the world was just starting to respond outside the courtroom. There was a silent terror in the security sector. Security companies halted contracts with some high-profile clients, and executive protection agencies summoned emergency meetings. Behind closed doors, Diddy's former associates who had previously publicly backed him were now making boilerplate remarks of shock and estrangement. Teams for crisis management were called in. While many tried to act as though they were surprised, the internet was already doing what it does best, connecting the connections that had been apparent for years when PR firms wrote internal memos asking clients to evaluate their security measures and NS. Resurfaced old photos showed Deal in the background at Diddy's events, always on guard. The most agonizing aspect was that old charges that had been written off as extortion efforts were being re-examined with fresh insight, based on current security logs that had been disclosed years earlier. Not only were fans stunned, they were enraged. That the system had included someone like Deal. The era of unquestioning protection was over, and Dodge's legal team filed for a mistrial, arguing that Deal's testimony was biased and that his evidence should have been excluded because of the NAS he had signed. They were furious that for years legitimate concerns had been buried under legal threats, and that the entertainment industry had allowed such behavior for so long. The motion was turned down. According to the judge, non-disclosure agreements cannot lawfully bar testimony regarding criminal activities, and the testimony was both admissible and pertinent to the criminal allegations. Legal professionals discussed the potential implications of Deal's evidence for the case. Marcia Johnson, a criminal defense lawyer, told CNN, "Because it comes from inside the enterprise, this testimony is catastrophic. This is not a purported victim who might be written off as having hidden agendas. This individual, who was compensated to defend the offender, instead recorded years of alleged criminal activity." Thomas Reynolds, a former prosecutor, was added. "The prosecution's evidence demonstrates a consistent pattern of behavior spanning decades rather than just isolated events. The framework that ties together all of the separate accusations into a cohesive criminal operation is provided by Deal's testimony and supporting documentation." In the courtroom again, when the trial started up again, Diddy looked a lot different. His once confident demeanor gave way to cautious vigilance, and his designer clothes were swapped out for more conservative clothing. Only his mother now frequently appeared in the courtroom, and his family's presence had dwindled. The prosecution persisted in presenting evidence, which Deal's testimony now contextualized. Other former workers came forward to verify some details of the Deal's account, many of them under subpoena. The defense changed its approach from categorical denial to implying that although certain actions could have been improper, they weren't criminal offenses. Deal's lawyer contended that he had pecuniary interests in gathering and keeping the evidence, implying that he had always intended to use it for leverage or financial gain. But the harm had already been done. someone who had been in the room, who had recorded the alleged crimes as they occurred, and who had ultimately decided to stand up despite the personal cost, had testified before the jury. In the last stages of the trial, the ramifications went well beyond Diddy. The security procedures of other celebrities came under further scrutiny. The ethics of non-disclosure agreements that addressed possible illegal activities were questioned by the public. Shock at one man's behavior gave way to indignation over a whole system that had shielded powerful abusers. After 4 days of jury deliberation and 6 weeks of testimony, the verdict was ultimately found guilty on all counts, including sex trafficking, conspiracy, racketeering, and transportation for prostitution. Diddy could spend decades behind bars for the most serious offenses, according to the court, who set sentence for 2 months later. He was escorted in handcuffs out of the courthouse. The music entrepreneur who had established a billion-dollar empire did not resemble Diddy at all. He resembled the verdict of the jury. He was a criminal who had silenced witnesses and victimized others by abusing his position of authority. Outside the courthouse, John D. spoke for a moment. "I don't consider today a victory. For the victims, it marks the start of their recovery. I hope my testimony helps ensure that powerful men can no longer create systems of silence and abuse. But I regret every day that I didn't speak sooner." The entertainment sector would undergo enormous changes as a result of the lawsuit. New ethical standards and rights for whistleblowers were introduced by security companies. Lawmakers proposed legislation to restrict the use of non-disclosure agreements in situations involving suspected criminal activity. Although victims' rights groups observed a rise in pleas for assistance from those in the entertainment business, the most significant effect was probably more straightforward. If you thought this tale was instructive, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It demonstrated how even the most meticulously planned systems of silence might finally fall apart when one person chose to speak the truth. We're dedicated to providing you with in-depth reporting on significant stories that others might overlook. Your assistance enables us to carry out this job. Thank you for watching.